astrology is like a gateway drug for spirituality. It just gradually, because, and actually in India, what's really fascinating about this, I was speaking at a conference in Calcutta some years ago. It was like East meets West astrologers all getting together, and I was giving a talk there, and I asked a question to a practitioner of Jyotish or Vedic astrology. I said, if the Shastras in the Vedic tradition sort of say you're not, I mean, this is kind of like Shastras being like Indian scriptures, broadly speaking, say like don't get attached to things in the world, but then you have this sacred branch of Vedic philosophy and science in astrology and Jyotish that's telling people when they're going to get their car or what. Like, so how does that match with the emphasis placed on detachment from distractions spiritually that could be, material or whatever? And the guy said, well, the astrologer that I asked the question to, he said, well, it's a very gradual process. People are at all different levels of their development spiritually as a soul from lifetime to lifetime. Now, this is obviously taking place in a paradigm where transmigration of the soul is just broadly accepted. And so he's like, from one lifetime to, like, a soul may be, one soul over here may have a lot more being more ensconced in the material world. What astrology is doing is telling them that ultimately there's a divine intelligence that's guiding everything, including your car, including your concern about the money or the marriage. And gradually, when a person sees the hand of destiny sort of playing out in these mundane ways, they come to realize there's something bigger behind it. And that may take a soul a couple of lifetimes, but Jyotish in that way is like building a bridge for people, he said, to spiritual life. Well, that's essentially what ancient mystics in the West said as well, is that this is like, we take people from a worldly concern into a way of framing it that's like eternal and transcendental, and that has an effect on the soul over time.
Like your take on fate and destiny versus free choice, because you've had some experiences outside even of astrology where, like, your own free choice, yes, date and destiny, yes, it's like yes, all. And I was like, wow, like actually it all is yes. And I mean, yeah, how do you reconcile all of that? Or is it's not meant to be reconciled by the mind, but it's all present, like,
Yeah.
fate, free will? Because yeah.
Yeah, that's like a huge, and it's such an interesting thing to note that conversation about the relationship between choice or freedom and free will and destiny or fate is ongoing, and these mystical schools and astrologers for thousands of years have debated the topic. So what I love is that somehow astrology has gone forward with practitioners who are very much in the corner defending free will, while you've had practitioners of astrology going on very much in the corner of fate, and then a blending of the two kind of all along the same timeline. What I will say, though, is that primarily in the ancient world, especially when I'm talking now about the Hellenistic world and the way that fate was conceptualized, and it's my understanding is that it's sort of similar in Indian philosophy, although I'm not a super expert on it. But they're really thought of, and this is very present, by the way, in Taoism as well, that they're thought of as like two sides of the same coin. That there's a conceptualization of reality that is, multidimensional, multivalent. And so while there's like a causal dimension or sort of like a causal plane, there are also like acausal, nonlinear, transcendental realms that are co-present with these realms, in which everything possible is sort of known and existing simultaneously. That's like, that's kind of mind-blowing to think about. But I feel like as soon as you say that, like even even my 9-year-old gets that when I kind of talk about there being a way in which time is real and then there's something beyond time at the exact same time. She's like, oh yeah, like dreams. Like that was like, I was talking with this about her, and she was, she just got it. She was like, yeah. So I think we have to be like, this reality is like Terence McKenna said. You've ever heard him? He's like, reality is stranger than we can possibly imagine. So I think, but a simple explanation that I've heard that I really like about how fate and free will interact is that there is a level at which, we have choice. Um, and but there are, because our choices are taking place in something like a river where there's all of these currents and all of these influences and all of these other choices, there is an inevitability that our choices meet with, right? Like, you put a choice into the stream and it combines with all of these other choices and it leads to outcomes. And as far as I've understood it, that would mean that a fate is the result of a choice, that there's a connection between a fate and choices or patterns of choices, and not just ours, but this very complex ecology of choices in the river of being, so to speak. So on that level, like, a very basic example would be, someone chooses a lifestyle pattern that is toxic and destructive to their body. Maybe it's smoking. A lot of people struggle with smoking. I smoked when I was earlier in my 20s. I had to quit. It was really hard to quit. And I probably, because I only smoked for a few years and it was still a mighty struggle for me to quit smoking, I probably didn't have as great a risk of something like lung cancer, because I made a choice to end that pattern. But the pattern starts locking into an outcome like lung cancer the longer we do it. Science tells us that, right? So in some ways, when I think of fate too, I just think of the inevitability of choice patterns leading to outcomes. The thing that I always go back to, though, is that with the whole reality is stranger you can imagine piece, is like, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita saying to Arjuna, he's like, karma, which is like the web of material choices and interactions and outcomes, the way that it works, the rules or laws of karma are beyond the wisest sages' understanding. Like, nobody can grasp this or circumscribe this with their mind. So I think when people usually run into problems with the idea of fate is when it's really hard to imagine how something happened, because we can't see a pattern of choices that leads to it, especially in the case of like really terrible things happening that seem to happen to really innocent people. Like, for me, the hardest one is when I see these school shootings on the news. I'm like, how does that make any, how is that? How are the, what is that? You know, so I think there's certain ways in which things are happening that you can't rely on some kind of simplistic explanation like, oh, well, those kids were bad in a past lifetime. It's stranger, it's more dynamic, it's more creative, it's more brilliant than we can possibly imagine. And there's going to be things that happen with respect to the more difficult aspects of the way that life plays out that we have to surrender our understanding of. It's like, I can't understand why bad things happen like that. Otherwise, I think it's really easy to get overwhelmed and sort of subsumed with a cynical point of view. It's very easy to do so when you see stuff like that happening.
Hey there, Inspired Evolutionary. If you absolutely loved this, well then here's a full conversation with this guest on the Inspired Evolution podcast. Check it out now.